Hello everyone. So today we're going to talk about lenses and how lenses control and shape your photography. So lens sharpness is not about quality. It's about obedience of the lens. For years, decades, photographers have generally looked for perfect glass, and we've come pretty close to that. What more and more photographers have realized over the last few years is it's not necessarily about optical perfection. Now, there are some areas of photography that do require optical perfection, and I'm not discounting that. But what I'm talking about is when you want character in your images. And this is why old lenses, why people adapt old lenses to their cameras. So that's one quality of the lens. Other qualities are that your lens controls what is removed from your scene. So it, depending on what you add or subtract from your scene, controls the feel and the intimacy of your photograph. Likewise, microcontrast is not really about sharpness. It's about making a picture feel more alive. In a previous video, I actually explained how to add microcontrast after the fact in Photoshop to an image. So you might want to check that out. You'll hear a lot about bokeh. Why is bokeh so important? Well, it's about the control of the areas of the image that are not in focus. Perfectly round highlights, or otherwise called bokeh balls, gives a smoothness to an image that adds more life to the image. But it's a calmness, where if you have polygon-shaped bokeh, that's going to add nervousness to your image. So that's where higher quality glass does add quality to your image. So now in this case, what I've done is I've gone out and I've taken my new Lumix S1R Mark II, and I have a Sigma 35mm f1.4. I have the Lumix S Pro 50mm f1.4 and the Sigma 85mm f1.4, and both the Sigma lenses are the DGDN variety f1.4 lenses, excuse me. So I took some pictures in my backyard, and let's look at those now. And let's look at how these lenses have shaped the image. And I have done nothing to these images. These are straight out of the camera. And I should have leveled this one. I wasn't initially paying close attention to the level of the camera, but I did later. So here you can see the lounging sofa out in the backyard. You see the palm fronds. This is a fairly intimate image. I'm 40 feet away from this image, and this particular image was taken with the Sigma 85mm f1.4 DGDN lens. Okay. Let me it over here. Again, this is the 85 millimeter, another area that we're looking at here in the backyard. Okay, now I've leveled the image. So it doesn't feel so jarring or incorrect looking at it. And it's still the 85 here. Okay, now this image was taken with the 50 millimeter lens. The camera is level, but now you have the edge of the pool coming in and filling the foreground. And now we have a bit of more of the fence. There's some sky in this. So the image is not as intimate as it was with the 85. But it's still workable. And something about lenses you should be aware of is that people talk about lens compression and flattening faces when you use longer focal lengths. And that's not quite an accurate statement. What flattens people's faces is distance. And what longer focal lengths give you is when you move further back and you put a longer focal length on, you're negating the distance in perspective. But the distance is still creating that flatness. So keep that in mind, because you can, now, I really probably can't with the 50 millimeter in this particular instance. I could only move like another foot towards the sofa, otherwise I'd be in the pool. So that's the consideration here. So, you know, if you want more intimacy and tighter control on your image, use a longer focal length. If you need to capture more details and a wider field of view, then, you know, use a wider focal length. So, you know, another image, again, 50 millimeter, showing, of course, including more of the area I'm photographing. So it's gathering more information. And now we're at the 35 millimeter. So now you have more information about where I'm at and what's going on. You know, again, it's 35 millimeter. And again, I didn't have the camera level. But as you can see, now it completely changes the feel of this image. Now, you know, it's not a rainforest behind the sofa. It's a clump of trees. And that's information you didn't necessarily have before. When you look back, and even there, you can begin to discern the fact that it's just a clump of trees. But here, now, it looks like the sofa is up against potentially a rainforest. Here's another perspective, kind of in reverse order. You know, here's the 35 millimeter. You know, I have distractions. You know, we have the back of the house here. Have the corner of a surfboard rack. here on the left side. And my target here are these two old windows that were hung on the fence. Okay, here we have the 85 millimeter, and the house is gone, the surfboard rack's gone. The image feels a bit more intimate. And here is the 50 millimeter, and I had actually slightly moved the camera here, and so it changed the perspective a bit. So anyway, this is just a random image. I put the 85 millimeter back on the camera. Anyway, so at this point, you've now been able to see the entirety of my backyard, more or less. Anyway, so that's it. It's high quality, and the idea here is that high quality lenses aren't necessarily about sharpness. There are multiple aspects to a lens and how it shapes your image. The longer the focal length, the more intimate the image. The wider or the smaller the aperture, the wider the field of view, the more data is being transferred into your image. Microcontrast. A lot of people ask, why are Leica lenses and Leica systems so expensive? They seem overpriced. Now, that used to be the big argument against Leica. Well, nowadays, the other camera systems have priced themselves right up there with Leica. And that's why, I now actually own a Leica. The reason, I have my Lumix S1R Mark II is more for doing these videos, personal work, and I'm going to be adapting lenses onto this camera. And I might actually adapt lenses onto my Leica M11 as well. I'm still trying to weigh what direction I want to go on that yet. So, but lenses definitely control the intimacy. The quality of your lenses will also impact the character of your lenses. Now, that's not to say that a cheap lens is going to give you great character, but Holga cameras, cheap plastic cameras with plastic lenses and massive light leaks, have actually become popular because those cameras introduce flaws into the image that lends the image character. In fact, you can buy, at least for the Canon, a plastic Holga lens to try and replicate that character. But this is one of the reasons too why people adapt Leica lenses onto other camera bodies, because those lenses are generally optically good. The older lenses will have flaws in them, but the flaws are generally minor and do not detract from the image quality. But probably the most important thing is those lenses have qualities that add to the microcontrast. So that's why people look for and collect Leica lenses. So there's a lot of information that I just threw out at you, but it's a consideration. And it's going to also depend on the style of photography that you're doing. Street photography is a big area where adding lens character is perfectly acceptable. Potentially wedding photography, in some circumstances can be very useful for adding character. But if you're doing architecture or if you're doing landscape, now some landscape photography can benefit from lens character, but as a general rule, landscape photographers want technically perfect lenses, and they will, through the use of filters, distance from their subject, field of view, exposure length, they use a variety of other tools to control how their image feels. Using a shallow depth of field on a lens to blur your background can have a dramatic effect on the quality of and the character of your image. You know, a little bit of distortion of your bokeh is okay. A lot is really going to add a lot of nervous energy to your images. So those are the thought points that you want to, you take your lenses out, practice with them, and observe those individual things. And again, like I said, go back through some of the other tutorials that I've put together. You'll see one where I go into detail on how you can enhance microcontrast on a photo, and how to correct and enhance your pictures through some of these things. And another one is your feet have an impact on the intimacy of your image. If you don't have an 85mm, you can still use your 50mm, get closer to your subject, and control that intimacy. So that's it. I hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you next time with our next class. Thanks. Bye.